Snow whispered across the Montana Ridge as Lieutenant Decker Grant stepped out of his battered Ford pickup. The wind cut through his old service rifle like a blade. They said the ranch was cursed, dead, worthless. But Axel stood frozen at the truck door, ears locked forward, body rigid as steel. Something was alive out there, and it wasn't waiting to be found. Let us know where you're watching from. Like and subscribe for more stories of faith, loyalty, and silent miracles. The two-lane highway cut through Montana wilderness like a scar. Snow drifted across asphalt in thin white ribbons. Decker gripped the steering wheel with both hands. His knuckles were white. His jaw was tight. Every mile deeper into the mountains felt like traveling backward through time. Glacier Falls appeared through the trees like a memory half forgotten. A town that progress had passed by. Wooden storefronts leaned slightly from decades of winter storms. A diner flickered with neon light that had probably been replaced once in 40 years. One gas station doubled as grocery store, hardware shop, and the gossip center. The kind of mountain town the wind never left alone. The kind of place where everyone knew your business before you did. Decker pulled beside the only working pump, the kind with numbers that clicked over mechanically instead of digitally. Cut the engine. Let silence settle inside the cab like an unwelcome guest. Axel sat upright in the passenger seat. The German Shepherd Malinois mix hadn't relaxed once since they passed the population sign. 842 people, a number that probably hadn't changed in 20 years. Every muscle in the dog's body was tense. His nose twitched constantly. Not in fear, in recognition, as if he already understood something Decker didn't, as if some part of his enhanced canine training had picked up a scent, a memory, a warning that hadn't yet formed into words. Decker reached over, rubbed behind Axel's scarred right ear. The scar ran from cheekbone to jaw. Chemical burn from something Decker didn't want to think about. Something he'd only learned about recently. Something that made his stomach turn every time he looked at it. Easy, partner. Just fuel and we're gone. But even his own voice sounded tired. Dry. Like it had been scraped across gravel for 9 months straight. 9 months of living in the truck. 9 months of running from memories that followed him like shadows. 9 months of wondering if there was any point in getting up tomorrow. He stepped out into cold air that stung the inside of his lungs. Montana in February didn't forgive weakness. The pump clicked on as he squeezed the trigger. Behind him, the station door jingled. 2 older men stepped outside. Steam rose from their coffee cups like smoke signals announcing his arrival. They weren't trying to be quiet. "That him?" the taller one asked. Gray beard that probably hadn't seen a trimmer in months. Flannel shirt worn thin at the elbows. Eyes that had seen enough strangers to be suspicious of all of them. "Yep, the nephew who got the dead ranch," the other man snorted. Shorter, thicker, older, face like weathered leather. "Poor fool. Honor Ridge ain't nothing but a graveyard with a mailbox." "Haunted, too. Old Nathaniel died up there alone. Sheriff says wolves dragged half his cattle into the trees. Probably got him, too, before the cold finished the job. That boy inherited a money pit. Bank'll take it before spring." Decker kept his back to them, jaw tightening. He'd heard worse in his life. Much worse. Words that cut deeper than these old men could imagine. But something about this hit different. Maybe because he'd already been running on fumes long before the truck needed gas. Maybe because this inheritance was the only thing standing between him and sleeping in a Walmart parking lot for the rest of his life. He glanced at Axel through the windshield. The dog's amber eyes were fixed on the mountains, ears pricked forward like radar dishes. Posture rigid, not toward the men gossiping behind him, toward the ridge above town, where Honor Ridge Ranch lay buried under snow and years of silence. Decker finished fueling, closed the cap. The number stopped at $42, nearly the last of his cash. He walked inside to pay. The interior smelled like old coffee and motor oil. The cashier was a man in his 50s with tired eyes and grease-stained hands that suggested he did more than run a register. He looked Decker up and down when he handed over his last few bills. Really looked. The way people looked at veterans, trying to figure out what war had done to them. "You're Nathaniel's boy," the man said. Not a question. Statement of fact. Decker nodded once. The cashier shrugged, counted the bills slowly. "Hope you're not expecting much up there. Folks say the place is cursed. Animals died off years ago. Buildings probably collapsed under the snow by now." Decker forced a polite smile. The kind he'd trained himself to give strangers so they wouldn't notice the tremor in his hands, so they wouldn't ask questions he didn't want to answer. "Just need to see it for myself." The cashier handed back his change, 17 cents. Your funeral. Road's been closed since January. You'll need chains on those tires. And a sat phone. Cell service dies about 5 miles up. I'll manage. When he stepped back outside, wind howled across the parking lot, like it was trying to shove him back where he came from, like the mountain itself was warning him away. Axel barked once, sharp, urgent, not at the men, not at the cars, at the mountain. Decker slid behind the wheel and started the engine. The heater coughed to life, barely warm, barely working. "All right," he whispered. "Let's get this over with." They pulled out of Glacier Falls. The town shrank behind them until it was only a cluster of fading colors in the rearview mirror. The mountain road cut through pines heavy with snow. Each twist and turn climbed higher, narrower, colder, the kind of road that didn't forgive mistakes. Axel leaned forward, nose pressed to the cracked windshield, breathing fast, fogging the glass with each exhale. Decker had seen that posture before. Search mode, alert mode, something's out there mode. The kind of posture Axel had shown in Syria when IEDs were close, when danger was invisible but imminent, when the only thing standing between life and death was trusting your K9 partner completely. "Relax," Decker murmured. "It's just a busted ranch." But his own stomach didn't believe it. The further they drove, the more memories pressed at him. Bits he couldn't fight off anymore. His uncle's name on a letter he never expected. The weight of a folded discharge paper tucked into the glove box. A VA counselor telling him with practiced sympathy, "You need somewhere quiet, somewhere safe." Safe. He almost laughed. Nothing in his life had felt safe in years. Not since Syria. Not since he'd hesitated for 6 minutes and 3 good men died because of it. Not since he'd come home to a country that thanked him for his service, but had no idea what to do with him afterward. Up ahead, the trees parted like a curtain being drawn back. A rusted gate leaned sideways across the entrance to a long, overgrown driveway. A wooden sign dangled crookedly from one remaining chain. Paint faded, letters barely visible. Honor Ridge Ranch. No trespassing. Keep out. Someone had spray painted over it, red letters, fresh enough to still drip in places. Cursed. Decker killed the engine. For a long moment, he didn't move. Just sat there staring at the gate, at the sign, at the driveway that disappeared into darkness. Axel, however, did move. His paw landed on Decker's arm. Firm, insistent, eyes locked on the dark line of the driveway ahead. The scar on his face caught the light. Reminder of whatever Titan energy had done to him. "You're really set on this, huh?" Axel barked once, low and certain, the way he barked when he'd found something. When the search was over and the target was located, Decker stepped out into knee-deep snow, pushed the broken gate aside. It groaned like an old man waking from a bad dream. The hinges screamed with rust and neglect. The air was still here, colder, untouched for too long, like stepping into a tomb. He returned to the truck, gripped the wheel with both hands, knuckles white again. "Dead ranch or not," he said quietly, "we're here now." As he drove through the gate, the forest swallowed them whole. Snow low whispered against the windshield. Branches above creaked like something alive, something watching, something waiting. Axel didn't look away from the dark path ahead. Not even once. Decker exhaled slowly, breath fogging the glass. Whatever waited at Honor Ridge Ranch, Axel sensed it. And Decker had learned long ago to trust his K9 partner more than he trusted himself. The truck crawled up the narrow mountain path, tires crunching over ice-packed gravel, each rotation sounding like bones breaking under pressure. The further they went, the more the world seemed to fold inward. Trees closing overhead like a tunnel, branches weighted with untouched snow, light thinning until it felt like dusk even though it was barely past noon. Axel sat forward in the passenger seat, tail rigid, every muscle tight as a cable. The kind of tension Decker had seen in combat zones, when the threat was close but invisible. Decker noticed the way his ears flicked left and right, independent movement, tracking sounds Decker couldn't hear, sounds only a K9 with enhanced hearing could detect. The wind carried a distant hum through the pines, something between a whistle and a low moan, metallic almost. Decker had heard that kind of sound before, in abandoned forward operating bases overseas, where metal scraped against concrete in the dark, where things were left to rot after the war moved on. But here the noise didn't feel man-made. It felt old, as if the mountain itself was warning him to turn around, to go back to Glacier Falls, to leave this place to its ghosts. He tightened his grip on the wheel and kept going. The driveway dipped suddenly, twisting along a ridge that overlooked a frozen creek. Water locked under ice so thick it looked like glass. Axel's head shot up, hackles rising along his spine. His nose pressed into the corner of the windshield, tracking something above the slope. "What do you see?" Decker murmured. Axel's answer was a deep rumble, low and steady, the kind of growl that meant threat detected. Decker followed his gaze. Between the pines, movement flickered. Maybe a shadow. Maybe a deer. Maybe nothing at all. But the hair on the back of Decker's neck lifted the same way it had on night patrols. When danger was close but unseen. When staying alive meant trusting your instincts even when you couldn't see the enemy. "All right," he muttered. "Noted." They continued up the winding path until the forest abruptly thinned. The clearing opened like a scar in the trees. Snow-covered fields stretched out in uneven patches. Fences broken and leaning. The ranch house stood in the center, leaning, weather-beaten, half swallowed by winter. Its roof sagged on the left side like a broken back. The porch steps were cracked and rotting. One shutter dangled by a single hinge, tapping against the siding with each gust. A rhythm like a heartbeat, slow, dying. Honor Ridge Ranch looked exactly as Glacier Falls had promised. Dead. But Axel didn't buy it. He let out a sharp bark, then another, pressing his paws against the door, desperate to get out, to get to something Decker couldn't see yet. Decker parked the truck and stepped out, boots sinking deep into fresh snow. It was quiet here. Too quiet. No birds, no engine noise from town. No animals moving in the nearby trees, only the steady breath of winter. And somewhere beneath it, something else. Something Axel could hear. Axel bolted toward the barn. "Axel," Decker called, jogging after him. The barn loomed taller than the house. Weathered boards blackened by decades of storms. The sliding doors barely hanging on their tracks. Rusted metal screaming against wood. Axel stopped inches from the gap between the doors, nose twitching violently. He released a short, urgent bark. The K9 alert code, target located. Decker slowed his pace. Something was wrong, he could feel it. Not danger exactly, something stranger, something impossible. He gripped the door handle and pulled. It groaned, slid a few inches, jammed against something, then finally slid open with a harsh scrape that echoed through the clearing. Decker stopped cold. The barn interior was warm and alive. Horses stirred in their stalls, tails flicking, eyes bright and alert. Goats shuffled in fresh straw, chickens perched along rafters, clucking softly. A mixed-breed dog lifted his head from a pile of blankets, studying Decker with calm brown eyes that showed no fear. Everything was clean, too clean for a place supposedly untouched by humans for months. Hay was stacked neatly in the corner. Buckets were washed and filled with fresh water. Feed bags were cut open with precision. Medical supplies lined a shelf. Bandages, antiseptic, needles organized by size. This wasn't abandonment. It was management. Active, recent, professional. But there was no one around. Axel wandered slowly down the center aisle, sniffing feed bins and water troughs, occasionally giving a short, confused huff. His canine training told him someone had been here recently, very recently, within the last hour. But his nose couldn't find them. Decker followed, boots echoing against the barn floor. His mind raced through impossible explanations. Had someone known he was coming? Had someone been living here in secret? Squatters, homeless people using the barn for shelter. He bent down and touched the water line in one of the troughs. Still warm. Someone had filled it this morning, maybe within the last 2 hours. Someone was here, he whispered. Axel stopped suddenly at the far end of the barn. He turned his head toward the open fields outside, ears tense, body angled protectively toward Decker. The way he stood when threats were close, when attack was imminent. Snowflakes drifted in through the open doorway. A cold gust rushed past Decker's shoulders. The air tasted different here. Fresher, sharper, charged with something he couldn't name. Electricity almost, like the air before a lightning strike. Axel's stance only confirmed it. Something was out there. "Show me," Decker said quietly. Axel led him outside into the field behind the barn, tracks scattered across the snow. Hoof prints from the horses, paw prints from Gwen's, boot prints, human, small, maybe size 4 or 5, child-sized, or a very small adult, and something that looked like tire tracks, but too light to be from any truck Decker recognized, more like a bicycle or a small cart. The ranch stretched wide before him, silent, endless, flanked by the dark wall of forest that seemed to press in from all sides. Decker turned to look at the house again. Even from this distance, something felt off. A shadow in the window, A drape moving no, just his mind filling emptiness with ghosts. But Axel growled softly, staring at the same window, his enhanced vision seeing something Decker couldn't. Okay, Decker said under his breath. You're spooking me, pal. He took a step toward the house, but a sudden metallic clatter echoed from the tree line, sharp, deliberate, like someone had dropped a tool. Axel snapped his head toward the sound, hackles raised, ready to engage. Decker turned sharply, squinting through the falling snow. A pickup truck was coming down the slope. Old, battered, held together more by rust than metal, engine sputtering. The driver's door opened before it even stopped fully. An elderly man stepped out, wearing a thick wool coat, carrying a tin bucket in one hand. His white hair blew wildly in the wind, but his eyes were sharp, clear. The eyes of someone who'd seen more than most and forgotten less than they should. He looked at Decker as if he had been expecting him, as if this wasn't a surprise at all. Decker stayed where he was, hand instinctively brushing his hip where a sidearm used to sit. Old habits. Axel stood protectively between them. Not aggressive yet, but ready. The old man raised his free hand, palm out, non-threatening. You must be Decker Grant. Scottish accent, thick as morning fog. Who's asking? Decker replied, voice steady but guarded. The man nodded once, like he'd expected the wariness, like he'd have been disappointed if Decker had been too trusting. Name's Dr. Callum Briggs. I knew your uncle, and I know why you're here. Decker didn't move. You do? Dr. Briggs rubbed a hand over his beard, gray and unkempt. His gaze swept past Decker toward the animals inside the barn. Something in his eyes softened. Your uncle's been gone a long time. But this place, he paused, choosing his words carefully. It wasn't dead, not even close. He looked past Decker toward the barn. I've been keeping them alive for years, he said softly. Because your uncle asked me to. Because he knew one day you'd come. Decker's stomach tightened. A cold ripple moved across his spine. He glanced at Axel. The dog's ears perked higher, as if recognizing truth in the man's tone, as if some part of his canine instincts told him this man was safe. Dr. Briggs stepped forward, slowly, giving them time to adjust. Decker, there's something you need to know about this ranch. The snow fell harder as Decker met the old man's eyes, wind howling through the pines like a warning. Axel stayed perfectly still, waiting. Whatever Dr. Briggs had to say, Decker sensed it would change everything. The old veterinarian stepped closer, wind tugging at his coat, snow catching in his beard. Your uncle didn't just own land, Decker, he said. He protected it, protected what lived on it. Decker didn't speak. Something in Dr. Briggs' voice, steady, sure, almost relieved, told him this was no joke. No ranch myth, no mountain rumor. This was truth, hard truth that had been buried too long. Dr. Briggs motioned toward the barn. You saw the animals already, didn't you? Decker nodded slowly. They're alive. All of them. Healthy. That's because they were never abandoned, Briggs replied. Your uncle built this place to be a sanctuary. Decker wiped melting snow from his eyebrows. A sanctuary for what? For the forgotten, Briggs said simply. For whatever the world cast aside. Injured, mistreated, experimented on. That last word hung in the air. Experimented on. He hid them here, Briggs continued, and after he passed, I kept his promise alive. But I wasn't alone. A gust of wind carried a low creak from the barn behind them. Decker turned, scanning the dark outline of the building. Axel moved beside him, posture sharper than before. The dog paced once in a half circle, nose pressed into the wind, as if reading a message only he could understand, as if catching a scent that triggered memories buried deep in his enhanced brain. Come, Dr. Briggs said, lifting his bucket. There's something I need to show you. Decker followed him back inside the barn. Axel stayed at his side, close enough to protect but far enough to have room to move if needed. The warmth surprised him again, the quiet, steady warmth of living bodies, of breath and heartbeat and life continuing despite everything. The animals turned their heads as they entered, eyes soft and familiar, as if greeting caretakers rather than strangers, as if Decker and Axel had been here before. Briggs walked down the aisle, brushing his fingers along a stall door. A chestnut horse inside snorted and leaned forward, nudging his shoulder gently. Affectionate, trusting. Decker stiffened out of habit. Touch wasn't something he handled easily anymore. Not since Syria, not since coming home. But the horse's calm presence eased the tension in his chest. Just slightly, just enough to breathe. Dr. Briggs watched him. Animals know when someone means them no harm, he said. They always knew your uncle, and somehow they know you. Decker wasn't sure how to respond, wasn't sure what to feel. Axel, meanwhile, inspected the stalls one by one, as if performing a tactical sweep. His canine training had taught him to clear rooms, to search for threats, to protect his handler at all costs. Decker's heart tightened as he watched his dog move. Focused, cautious, loyal beyond measure. Axel was trained for danger, not for this quiet kind of work. Yet the dog seemed drawn to it, almost protective over the animals, like he understood they were vulnerable, that they needed protection. 200, Briggs said quietly. Give or take a few. Some come, some pass on. He let out a breath. But make no mistake, Decker, this place isn't a ranch. It's a lifeline. Decker leaned against the support beam, letting the weight of everything sink in. 200 animals, hidden here, cared for in secret, by his uncle, by this old man, by someone else they hadn't found yet. Why didn't anyone tell me? Why didn't my uncle? Because he didn't want them taken, Briggs interrupted gently. Once word gets out that he's gone, the wrong people take an interest. He paused, eyes darkening. And they already have. Decker studied him. What wrong people? Dr. Briggs hesitated, looking suddenly older, more tired. Not yet. We'll get there. For now, you need to understand what you inherited. He led Decker toward the back of the barn, where a storage room sat half open. Inside were shelves lined with neatly stacked supplies. Feed organized by type, rolled bandages sorted by size, medical tinctures labeled in careful handwriting, tools sharpened and cleaned, everything in its place. None of it looked neglected. Someone had been here recently, not days ago, hours. That's what makes this part strange, Briggs said. I wasn't the only one watching the place. Decker felt a tight pull in his chest. What do you mean? Briggs crouched beside a workbench, retrieved a folded blanket. On it were faint footprints, small, light, almost careful, like someone trying not to be noticed. These tracks weren't here yesterday, he said, and they're not mine. Axel sniffed the prints, then the air, then growled, low, territorial, the kind of growl that meant intruder detected. Decker's pulse quickened. Whoever had been here wasn't far, might still be watching, might be in the barn right now. He stepped backward, scanning the barn again with new eyes. It had felt emptier when he arrived, but now the shadows felt heavier, intentional, like something or someone had stepped aside just before he entered. Dr. Briggs seemed to read his thoughts. Your uncle had enemies, Decker. People who wanted this land. People who wanted to silence what he was doing here. He paused. They don't like that you're back. Decker exhaled through his nose. Yeah, he muttered. I figured. A metal clang echoed from outside, sharp, deliberate. Axel snapped to attention, sprinting toward the open doorway. Decker followed on instinct, boots gripping the hay-dusted floor, heart already racing. They burst into the cold, scanning the white field beyond. Nothing moved. Only the falling snow, only the wind, only the silence. Axel stood rigid, eyes fixed on the forest edge, every muscle coiled, ready to chase, ready to fight. Something's watching, Decker said quietly. Dr. Briggs nodded. Something always is. They returned to the barn. Briggs closed the doors. The animals settled again. But Decker's heart didn't. Axel paced the aisle with restless energy, ears twitching at every creak. He was trained to detect danger, and he wasn't wrong often. Briggs rested a hand on Decker's shoulder. Listen to him, Atim, he said. Your Axel knows this place better than you think. Decker didn't answer. His mind was racing. Memories, instincts, fragments of missions he'd rather forget, all pressing against the quiet of the barn. 200 animals, no visible caretaker, fresh supplies, strange footprints, and a dog who wouldn't stop scanning the shadows. Decker swallowed hard. Briggs, he said, who exactly was my uncle protecting them from? Briggs's expression hardened, face going grim. A corporation called Titan Energy, and if they find out you're here, everything your uncle built could fall apart. The barn lights flickered as another gust rattled the roof. Decker stared at the animals, at Axel, at the snow beyond the door. This was no dead ranch. It was alive, hidden, and threatened. And now so was he. Syria, 2 years ago. The memory came fast, sharp as shrapnel, unavoidable. Lieutenant Decker Grant crouched behind a crumbling concrete wall, Dust hung in the air like smoke after a bombing. The compound stretched ahead, silent, too silent. The kind of silence that meant death was waiting. Axel sat at his side, 3 years old then, lean, alert, trained for bomb detection at the K-9 school in Lackland. His nose twitched constantly, ears locked forward, body vibrating with tension. Then he barked, sharp, urgent, 3 times, the code, IED detected. Do not advance. Decker raised his fist. The team froze. 6 men, good men, men with families waiting back home, men who trusted him with their lives. Hold, Decker whispered into the radio. He stared at the building ahead, where the American journalist was being held hostage, where intel said the hostage had less than an hour before execution. But Axel never lied. If the dog said bomb, there was a bomb. Decker called command, requested clearance to advance with alternate route. Command said wait, verify, get eyes on target first, follow protocol. So Decker waited. 6 minutes. It felt like 6 hours, every second ticking by while men argued over radio channels, while bureaucracy decided if caution was worth the risk. When clearance finally came, they moved. Fast, disciplined, silent as ghosts. But the world exploded anyway. Not from the IED Axel found, from 3 others hidden in the walls. The ambush came from all sides. Muzzle flashes in the dark, screams, blood, the sound of bullets hitting flesh, the sound of men dying. Corporal Blake Sutherland went down first, 26 years old, 2 kids back in Texas, a wife who sent him care packages every week. He didn't make a sound, just dropped like someone had cut his strings. Sergeant Travis Holbrook tried to pull him back, 30 years old, newly engaged, wedding planned for September. The second blast caught him in the chest, tore him apart before he could scream. Private Dylan Merritt covered their retreat, 22, fresh out of boot camp. Still believed war could be won with courage alone. Still believed good guys always won. He was wrong. The third explosion took him before he could finish the sentence he was shouting. Decker dragged Axel behind cover. The dog was bleeding from the ears, shell-shocked, whimpering, but alive. 3 men weren't, because Decker waited 6 minutes. 6 minutes that felt like nothing. 6 minutes that cost everything. Decker gasped, eyes snapping open. He was back in the barn, back in Montana, back in the cold. His hands were shaking. His breath came fast and shallow. Sweat on his forehead despite the freezing air. Axel stood in front of him, nose pressed to Decker's chest, whining softly, grounding him, bringing him back, the way he'd been trained to do, the way he'd done 100 times since Syria. I'm okay, Decker whispered. I'm okay. But his voice cracked. Because he wasn't okay. Hadn't been okay in 2 years. Might never be okay again. But Axel didn't move. The dog stayed pressed against him until Decker's breathing slowed, until the shaking stopped, until the memory retreated back into the dark corner where it lived. Dr. Briggs stood a few feet away, silent, respectful, not trying to help, just waiting. When Decker finally looked up, the old man nodded. Your uncle had those too, Briggs said quietly. The flashbacks. He served in the Gulf. Lost men he loved. Spent the rest of his life trying to save what he could. He paused. That's why he built this place. Decker wiped a hand across his face. To save animals. To save anything that still had a chance. The words hung in the cold air like breath made visible. Decker looked at the 200 animals around him. Creatures the world had abandoned. Creatures his uncle refused to let die. Creatures that didn't judge him for his failures. And for the first time in 2 years, Decker felt something shift inside him. Not peace, not yet, but purpose. Small, fragile, like a candle flame in the wind, but real. They moved toward the ranch house next. Honor Ridge's main cabin stood crooked, leaning into the storm like a tired giant that had fought too many battles. Its windows were fogged over from inside. Its porch sagged in the middle. The wooden steps groaned when Decker climbed them, threatening to break under his weight. Inside, the air was stale but not frozen. Someone had been inside recently. Dust had been disturbed. A faint boot print, smaller than Decker's size 5, maybe cut through the grime on the floorboards, leading from the door toward the back of the house, then disappearing. Briggs stepped in behind him. Your uncle lived simply. He didn't keep much. Decker walked through the living room, past a stone fireplace blackened by old use, past furniture covered in sheets, past a kitchen where dishes still sat in the sink from months ago. Axel sniffed the frame of the fireplace, nose pressing against a loose brick. He nudged it lightly, curious. What is it? Decker whispered. Axel nudged harder, using his nose the way he'd been trained to search, the way he'd found IEDs in Syria, the way he'd saved lives. The brick shifted. Decker crouched, easing it out carefully. Behind it sat a small metal latch attached to a wooden panel. He tugged gently, revealing a narrow storage cavity set deep in the wall. Hidden, deliberate, empty. Something was here, Briggs whispered. Decker scanned the room instinctively, the old hyper-awareness from years of training sliding back into place like muscle memory. Someone had been inside the cabin. Someone had accessed that hiding place recently, taken whatever was inside. The question was who, and what had they taken? Briggs pointed toward the back door. Let's check the shed. They made their way outside. Snow whipped sideways now, the wind rising, temperature dropping. Axel stayed close, but his eyes tracked every corner, every flicker of motion. Decker watched his dog with growing unease. Axel wasn't behaving like he was scouting prey. He was scanning for a threat. When they reached the shed, Briggs pushed open the door. The small structure smelled of hay metal and something faintly antiseptic, like a hospital, like a lab. Inside shelves stacked with veterinary tools lined the walls. Bandages organized by size. Clippers, carriers, feed sacks, all far too organized to be abandoned. Briggs sighed. Your uncle never wanted me to shoulder this alone, but he didn't expect to die as soon as he did. Decker ran his fingers along the edge of a workbench. Everything clean, everything in place. He left no messages, no instructions, only that you'd come someday. Briggs met his eyes. And that I was to keep this place hidden until then. Decker stared at him. Why me? I barely knew him. Because he knew what kind of man you'd become, Briggs said. Matter of fact, someone who doesn't run when things get dangerous. Decker looked away, jaw tightening, hands clenching into fists. He didn't feel like that man anymore. Not since the noise in his head started. Gunpowder echoes that woke him at night, memories that stalked him like ghosts. The weight of 3 deaths that sat on his chest every morning. But Briggs spoke as if he saw something Decker couldn't, as if he saw past the broken veteran to whoever Decker used to be. Before he could respond, a deep grunt echoed from outside the shed, followed by frantic rustling in the woods. Branches breaking, something running. Axel bolted, sprinting toward the noise, moving faster than Decker had seen him move in months. Axel, Decker yelled, racing after him through the snow. The dog reached the tree line first, barking violently, the aggressive bark, the attack bark. Decker skidded to a stop beside him, scanning the shadowed forest. Pine branches moved, swaying unnaturally against the direction of the wind. Then he saw it, a figure, small, low to the ground, darting between trees with the speed of something terrified, something running for its life. Decker's pulse surged. Hey, he called out. The figure vanished deeper into the woods, leaving only a trail of disturbed snow. Small footprints, running, stumbling, desperate. Axel barked again, wanting to give chase, every instinct screaming to pursue, but Decker grabbed his collar. No, not in this storm. Briggs finally caught up, breath fogging, face red from cold and exertion. You saw it too. Decker nodded. Someone was here, someone small, maybe a teen, maybe younger. They've been watching, Briggs whispered. Waiting. For what? To see if you're the man your uncle believed you were. Decker stared into the woods until the blur of snow made the trees disappear, until all that remained was white emptiness and the knowledge that someone was out there. Something or someone was out there, caring for the animals, guarding the ranch, hiding in the shadows. A ghost in the forest, a ghost that knew Decker Grant had finally come home. But ghosts weren't the only things hiding on Honor Ridge. And by morning, the storm would bring more than snow. By nightfall, the ridge was swallowed in darkness so complete, it looked like the world had folded in on itself. The air froze sharp enough to sting the lungs with every breath. A hard wind rattled every loose board of the old ranch house, testing weaknesses, finding gaps. Decker moved through the rooms with a flashlight, checking windows, checking locks, checking the sidearm he hoped he wouldn't need but knew he probably would. Axel paced nonstop, not anxious, alert, tracking every sound outside, every creak, every whisper of wind, the way he'd paced before missions, before combat, before everything went wrong. Decker laid a hand on his dog's back. We'll get through this, partner. Axel didn't relax, didn't sit, didn't stop scanning. Outside, the creek that fed the water system cracked under the pressure of encroaching ice. Snow drifted against the fences like sand in a desert. The ranch seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for something to break. Then a metallic snap echoed through the stillness. Sharp, deliberate, man-made. Axel spun toward the back window, hackles rising along his spine. Decker killed the flashlight, plunging the room into darkness. Another snap, sharper, closer. The water system. Decker grabbed his coat and stepped onto the porch. Axel launched forward beside him. Not waiting for commands, the cold punched him immediately. Stealing breath, numbing exposed skin. But Axel didn't hesitate. He sprinted toward the lower pasture, barking with urgency. The K9 alarm code, threat detected. Immediate danger. Axel slowed down. Too late. The dog disappeared into the darkness beyond the porch light. Decker followed, boots slipping on hard ice as he cut toward the water channels built generations earlier. The moon broke through thin clouds, just enough silver light to reveal the disaster. Pipes, thick insulated PVC, lay in pieces on the ground, not shattered, not broken by the cold, cut cleanly, precisely, deliberately. Water gushed from the severed joints, freezing the moment it touched ground, turning the pasture into a slick icy hazard that would kill anyone who slipped on it. Horses huddled near the fence, stamping nervously, eyes wide with fear. Goats bleated, restless, confused. The cattle shifted in slow confusion, not understanding why the water had stopped. Decker knelt, lifting one of the pipe fragments. The cut edge gleamed in the moonlight, smooth as glass. Bolt cutters, heavy duty, industrial grade, the kind used for sabotage, the kind used by professionals. Titan energy, Axel barked from deeper in the dark. The sound exploded through the night, a furious defensive bark, the kind Decker hadn't heard since deployment, the kind that meant combat was imminent. Axel, I'm coming! Decker sprinted toward the barking, slipping on ice, throat burning from the cold. The trees closed in, black shapes reaching down like hands trying to grab him. Axel's growls sharpened, no longer warning, fighting. Decker rounded a pine cluster just in time to see Axel lunging at a figure retreating into the woods. A shadow wearing dark clothes, moving fast, deliberate, professional. Axel chased, but the figure slammed something metallic against the dog's side. Hard, brutal. A short, sharp yelp cut the air. Number Axel stumbled in the snow, legs giving out for a second before catching. Decker reached him, dropping to his knees, hands already searching for injuries. Axel stood, shaking, his breath steaming heavily. He wasn't bleeding, but something had hit him hard. Maybe a baton, maybe a boot. The dog's ribs on the left side were already swelling, already bruising. Easy, partner, Decker murmured, running hands down his ribs, feeling for breaks, for internal bleeding. I've got you. Axel winced, but didn't collapse. Stubborn, loyal, unbreakable. The forest swallowed the fleeing assailant. Whoever it was, they moved like someone trained, like military, like someone who knew how to disappear. Decker and Axel limped back toward the pasture. Animals were collapsing to their knees, weak, thirsty, panicked. Without flowing water, dehydration hit fast in winter. 6 hours without water and freezing temperatures meant death for livestock. Decker snapped into seal mode, the switch flipping in his brain like it had 1,000 times before. Adrenaline sharpened his senses. Calm replaced fear. Muscle memory took over. Training overriding panic. Come on, he told Axel. We fix this now. He sprinted back to the shed, Axel keeping pace despite his injury, despite the pain. Decker grabbed every hose bucket and tool he could find. Then he raced to the creek, smashing ice with a shovel, breaking through layer after layer, carving a temporary channel. Water trickled, then flowed. Decker filled buckets, hauling them to the animals, back and forth, fighting the cold that bit through his gloves, through his coat, through his skin. Axel stood guard behind him, gaze fixed on the woods. Even injured, the canine partner refused to leave his post, refused to abandon his duty. When the weaker animals struggled to reach the troughs, Axel moved, herding them gently, nudging goats with his nose, using the skills he'd learned at K9 school years ago, skills buried under combat training, but never forgotten. Hours passed. Finally, the animals steadied. None collapsed again. None died. Decker dropped onto a bale of hay, breath steaming, exhaustion settling into his bones like lead, every muscle screaming, every joint aching. Axel eased down beside him, resting his head on Decker's boot, too tired to lift his head, too loyal to leave. I know, Decker whispered. They're not playing around. Axel blinked slowly, too tired to respond. Decker stared at the shattered water system. An entire network of pipes ruined in minutes. Hundreds of dollars of damage. Weeks of work to fix. This wasn't on intimidation. This was an eviction attempt. A warning. A test of how fast he'd break. How fast he'd give up and leave. Snow began falling again. Quiet and heavy. Covering the evidence. Burying the crime. The ranch lay wounded but alive. Decker put a hand on Axel's neck, feeling the steady heartbeat beneath fur. They think they can scare us off, he murmured. They don't know us at all. Axel's tail thumped weakly. Once. Twice. Agreement. Decker looked back at the forest where the assailant had disappeared. Somewhere out there, the ghost who cared for these animals might still be watching. Might be afraid. Might be deciding whether to trust him. But tonight proves something else. Titan Energy wasn't afraid of being seen, and they weren't done. Decker stood slowly, looking over his land as snow settled on the ruined pipes and frightened animals. His land now. His responsibility. His fight. This is just the first strike, he said. Axel stood beside him, steady despite his pain, ready despite his injuries. Decker tightened his coat, eyes narrowing against the storm. Let them come. We're still here. The wind howled through the pine, carrying with it a cold promise. The attacks would get worse. But Decker Grant didn't run from fights. Not then, not now, not ever. Decker barely slept. Dawn crept over Honor Ridge in a thin gray line, lighting the barn, the patched water channels, the icy ground where the saboteur had fled hours before. Everything looked peaceful in the morning light, deceptively peaceful. Axel slept beside his bed, breath slow but uneven, ribs bruised from the hit in the dark, purple and yellow spreading across his left side. Decker knelt beside him, running gentle fingers along the dog's side, checking for signs of internal bleeding, for broken ribs, for anything that needed immediate medical attention. You held the line, he whispered. You always do. Axel opened one eye, thumping his tail weakly, then wincing at the movement. Dr. Briggs arrived shortly after sunrise, coat dusted with snow, eyes lined with exhaustion that suggested he hadn't slept either. He'll be sore, but he'll heal, the old vet said after checking Axel, pressing gently along the ribs, listening to his breathing. K9 dogs bounce back quicker than people do, built tougher. Decker nodded. That makes one of us. They stepped outside together. The storm had passed, leaving the ranch covered in a glittering frost that made everything look clean, new, untouched. But the beauty did nothing to hide the damage. Water pipes lay in shredded pieces. The fence near the barn sagged where something or someone had climbed it. Boot prints dotted the frozen mud near the tree line. Size 12, male, heavy, professional. Titan Energy had made its message clear. Leave or die. Briggs waited a long moment before speaking, choosing his words carefully. Your uncle knew they'd try again. He told me to show you something if things ever turned violent. Decker raised an eyebrow. And this qualifies? Briggs's voice was grim. Oh, yes. He motioned toward the ranch house. Decker followed, Axel limping behind them, determined not to be left out, determined to stay by Decker's side no matter what. They stepped inside the dim, drafty cabin. Briggs moved with purpose, heading straight to the back bedroom. Nathaniel's old room, the place where his uncle had spent his final days. Briggs knelt and pulled back the frayed rug. Under it lay a wooden floorboard carved with a pattern barely visible beneath years of dust. Symbols, letters, something deliberate. Help me lift it, Briggs said. Decker wedged his fingers beneath the board and pulled. The old wood groaned, protested, then lifted free, exposing a crawl space no bigger than a coffin. Cold air poured out, stale, old, untouched for months. Axel sniffed the opening, ears pinned forward, curious but cautious. Inside, resting on the frozen dirt, sat a steel military-grade case, heavily sealed, edges rusted from moisture, lock dented but intact. Decker froze. He knew these cases. They didn't hold keepsakes. They didn't hold family photos or sentimental letters. They held secrets, the kind of secrets men died to protect. What is this? Decker whispered. Your uncle called it insurance, Briggs said. He said if anything happened to him, you'd know what to do. Decker lifted the case. It was heavier than it looked, solid as concrete, dense, like it was filled with lead. He set it on the bed and spun the combination dial, rusted, stiff. Barely turning, Briggs handed him a slip of paper with the code. "You sure this is meant for me?" "He wrote your name on it," Briggs replied. Decker inhaled and turned the dial, numbers clicking into place. The lock resisted, then clicked open. He opened the lid slowly, half expecting it to be empty, half expecting another mystery. Inside lay 4 items. A flash drive marked Titan Energy Incident Room 4B, a stack of financial ledgers listing payments to local officials, including Sheriff Wade Colburn, thousands of dollars, dates, signatures, everything documented. A folded map of Glacier Falls Valley with red X marks covering areas labeled Toxic Waste Burial Zone. 27 locations, each one circled, each one dated, and a letter, sealed in a simple envelope, addressed in his uncle's shaky handwriting, the handwriting of a man who knew death was coming. "Decker, if you're reading this, it means they finally came for me." Decker sat on the edge of the bed and opened the letter. The handwriting shook with age and fear. "Titan Energy used the ranch as a dumping ground. When I found what they were doing to the animals, what they were ejecting into them, I tried to expose them. I thought I had time. I was wrong. They killed Garrett Whitmore for asking questions. They're watching me now. When the moment comes, they'll make it look like an accident. You're the only one who can finish what I started. Don't trust Colburn. Don't trust anyone they fund. Protect Axel. He's more important than he knows. And whatever happens, protect the animals. They're not just animals, they're evidence. Your uncle Nathaniel Grant." The letter shook in Decker's hand. Evidence, not just living creatures, not just a sanctuary. Witnesses. Proof, the kind of proof that could bring down a corporation. Briggs placed a hand on the case. "Your uncle was terrified. He told me Titan wasn't just experimenting. They were covering up something enormous, something criminal." Axel pushed his head into Decker's knee, sensing the tension, sensing the danger. Decker stared at the flash drive. Titan Energy Incident Room 4B, the same room number he'd seen once in a leaked military file years ago. Rumored to be tied to illegal testing on working dogs and livestock. Rumors he'd dismissed as conspiracy theories. He swallowed hard. "Briggs, how long have you known all this?" "Since your uncle's last winter alive," Briggs said quietly. "But without you, I couldn't stop them. I'm an old man with a vet bag and shaky hands." He paused. "You're a SEAL. You know how to fight." Decker set the letter down. "I'm a retired SEAL with a PTSD diagnosis and no backup." Briggs met his eyes. "You have Axel, and you have the truth." Axel barked once, as if confirming, as if saying we're in this together. Decker stood, gripping the steel case. "We take this to someone outside Glacier Falls, someone Titan doesn't own." Before Briggs could respond, Axel suddenly stiffened, growled toward the window, deep, threatening. Decker moved to it, pushing aside the curtain. At the far edge of the tree line stood a figure, small, thin, watching. Same silhouette from the night before. The ghost. Decker stepped onto the porch. Axel pushed past him, moving despite the pain. But when Decker reached the open yard, the figure darted behind a pine and vanished, leaving only a faint trail of footprints. Small, desperate, afraid. Briggs stepped up beside him. "It's the same ghost." Decker nodded. "And they know we found the case." The wind cut across the yard, carrying a warning Decker couldn't ignore. Someone else wanted this evidence. Someone desperate. Someone afraid of what Decker now knew. Someone who might be trying to protect it or destroy it. Decker looked down at Axel. The dog's breath puffed white in the cold. Body tense despite the injuries. "We're done reacting," Decker whispered. "From now on, we go on offense." Axel's tail lifted just slightly. The resolve was mutual, hidden beneath the snow, beneath the floorboards, beneath years of fear and silence. Decker's inheritance wasn't land or animals or a dead man's cabin. It was a war, and now he had the proof to fight it. By late morning, the cold sun began creeping over Glacier Falls, turning the snow on the fences into glittering shards. Decker loaded the steel case into the truck, checked Axel's ribs one more time. The swelling had gone down slightly, but the dog still moved stiffly. "We're meeting someone who can help us handle this legally," Decker murmured. "Stay close. No surprises." Axel nudged Decker's hand, gaze steady, trusting. The drive down the mountain was tense. Every bend in the road feeling tighter than the last. Wind struck the trees. Snow swirled like dust devils in the air. Decker kept one hand on the wheel, one hand free. An old habit he couldn't shake. The habit of being ready for ambush. As the truck approached Glacier Creek Bridge, Axel suddenly lifted his head. A low growl crawled out of him. Not the warning growl, the combat growl. Decker slowed. What is it? Axel's ears pinned forward, muscles bunched, body coiling. Something was wrong. Decker rolled the truck onto the wooden planks of the bridge. Water roared beneath the ice-crusted creek. Fog drifted from the ravine below like smoke. Axel let out a single explosive bark. Decker's instincts snapped into place. He hit the brakes. Nothing ahead. Road clear. Then Decker saw it in the rearview mirror. Movement behind them, a black SUV pulling onto the bridge, blocking the exit. They were boxed in. Axel barked ferociously. The K9 threat warning. Maximum alert. Attack imminent. Decker's hand slid to the glove box, to the sidearm he'd hoped he wouldn't need. Then figures stepped into view ahead. 3 men, dark jackets, tactical boots, earpieces, moving with military precision. Titan energy. Decker stepped out of the truck slowly, palms visible but ready. Axel leapt out beside him, positioning himself between Decker and the approaching men, every muscle coiled, ready to attack. One of the operatives spoke first. Calm, professional. Cold as the Montana winter. Decker, Grant, we're here for the case. Decker didn't flinch. You vandalized my ranch, injured my K9, broke into private property. You really think I'm handing anything over? The man sighed, like this was all so predictable, so tiresome. You don't have a choice. There are easier ways to do this. Don't make us escalate. Axel bared his teeth, the sound deep and primal, the sound of a predator ready to kill. Decker's voice dropped. You already escalated. The man lifted a hand, gave a signal. Take the dog first. The world narrowed. Time slowed. Decker moved before the order even finished leaving the man's mouth. Years of training kicking in. Reflexes faster than thought. He grabbed Axel's collar. Stay with me now. But Axel didn't stay. He lunged forward, not at Decker, at the operative on the right, the one reaching for a tranquilizer gun, the one who'd made the mistake of targeting him first. The K9 exploded into motion, slamming into the man's chest with the full force of his weight. Years of attack training unleashed in one brutal second, teeth finding throat, claws finding flesh. The bridge echoed with chaos. Decker fired a warning shot into the wooden planks at the operative's feet. Splinters flew. The men scattered like startled birds. 2 charged at Decker. He pivoted, dodging, using their momentum against them as he drove an elbow into one man's ribs. The operative folded, gasping. Decker grabbed the second by the jacket, slammed him against the railing hard enough to knock the wind out. Axel tore the tranquilizer gun from the first man's grip, teeth snapping, snarling, refusing to let go. But there were too many. Another operative swung a baton at Axel, fast, vicious. Decker's heart lurched. Axel, move! The dog twisted, avoiding a direct hit, but the baton clipped his hind leg, the injured leg. Axel yelped in pain, stumbling on the frozen planks, leg giving out. Decker's vision blurred with fury. He charged forward, tackling the man who'd struck Axel. They hit the bridge hard, wood cracking beneath them. Decker pinned him with a forearm across the chest, pressing down, cutting off air. Touch him again, Decker growled, and you'll regret it. The man struggled, but Decker held firm. All the rage, all the guilt, all the pain of 2 years channeled into one moment. Behind him, the lead operative shouted, Grant, this isn't worth dying over. Decker rose slowly, chest heaving, blood pounding in his ears. It is to me. The man aimed a taser. Axel, limping but determined, dragged himself in front of Decker. Snarling with a rage Decker had only seen on combat missions, standing between his handler and danger. The way he always had, the way he always would. And then the blast of a shotgun echoed across the bridge. Everyone froze. A figure emerged from the fog at the far end of Glacier Creek Bridge. Shotgun aimed at the lead operative, steady, confident, dangerous. An older man, gray beard, limping slightly, eyes sharp as steel. You boys picked the wrong veteran to mess with, the man said calmly. Behind him, 2 more trucks pulled up. Local ranchers, rough and weathered. Men who'd seen Titan's grip on the town long enough. Men who'd had enough. Hank Rawlings, Marine Corps, Vietnam, Medal of Valor. 71 years old and still ready to fight. The operative stiffened. This isn't over, the lead man hissed. Decker stepped forward, blood on his knuckles, fury in his eyes. You're right, it's just starting. The operatives retreated, one dragging the unconscious man Axel had knocked down. They backed toward their vehicles, never taking eyes off Decker or the veterans blocking the bridge, never turning their backs. Engines roared. Both vehicles reversed off the bridge and vanished into the forest road. The wind returned. Silence fell, heavy, charged. Decker knelt beside Axel, checking his leg. Bruised, tender, but not broken, not shattered. "You saved me," Decker whispered. Axel pressed his nose gently into Decker's shoulder, breathing hard, hurting, but alive. Hank Rawlings lowered his gun and approached. "Name's Hank Rawlings, Marine Corps, Vietnam." Decker stood, shook his hand. "Decker Grant, Navy SEAL." Rawlings nodded toward Axel. "That K-9 fought like 10 men, saved all our asses." Decker swallowed hard, emotion pulling at the edges of his voice. They wanted him. They came for him first. "And they'll keep coming," Rawlings warned. "But now you're not alone." Axel leaned against Decker's leg, exhausted but standing, refusing to give up. Decker rose, looking down at the quiet creek, the fog drifting like ghosts beneath the bridge. Titan Energy was done hiding, done warning. They wanted the case. They wanted silence. They wanted Axel gone. Decker tightened his grip on the steel case. "They'll try again," he said. Rawlings nodded. "Then we'll be ready." Decker looked down at his loyal K-9 partner, shaking, bruised, but alive, still fighting. "You hear that, Axel?" he whispered. "We're not backing down." Axel lifted his head, eyes fierce through the pain. They stood together on that old wooden bridge. Man, dog, and the few allies willing to step into danger. And behind them, Glacier Creek roared like a warning. The storm had arrived. Word of the ambush spread through Glacier Falls faster than wildfire. Some whispered Decker brought trouble with him. Others said Titan Energy finally showed its teeth. But by the next morning, the entire town seemed to pulse with a silent, nervous rhythm. Windows cracked open just enough to watch him pass. Conversations stopping mid-sentence. Doors closing too quickly. Eyes following but never meeting his. Decker ignored the stares. He didn't ignore Axel's limp. Every uneven step from his K-9 partner struck Decker like a blow. Axel kept his head high, willing himself to stay strong, but his right leg trembled with each movement, pride and pain warring in every step. Decker lifted him gently into the truck. Axel didn't protest. Another sign something wasn't right. Rawlings had given him a name before they parted ways on the bridge. Evelyn Drummond, environmental lawyer, the only attorney in Montana who'd taken on Titan Energy before, and lived. Decker found her office on the edge of town, a brick building with a faded sign, Drummond and Brooks Environmental Law, the kind of place that looked like it had seen better days but refused to quit. He parked. Axel limped beside him up the steps, refusing to be carried, refusing to show weakness. Inside the office felt warm, out of place in Glacier Falls. Polished wood desks, a wall of files floor to ceiling, framed certificates from law schools back east. Everything organized, professional, serious. A woman stepped into the lobby, tall, dark-haired, sharp-eyed, 44 maybe. The kind of person who had spent her life under pressure and didn't blink. Scottish accent like Dr. Briggs, like she'd come from somewhere else looking for something this town couldn't give. "You're Decker Grant," she said, almost flatly. Decker nodded. "That obvious?" You walked in with a K-9 partner in the same expression veterans have when they're carrying something heavy. She stepped closer, eyes assessing, taking in the bruises on Decker's knuckles, the way Axel favored his right leg. Glacier Falls has been buzzing since this morning. Something about the ranch not being as dead as everyone claimed. Decker opened the steel case, placed the flash drive and documents on her desk, one by one, like laying out evidence at a crime scene. Titan Energy, Sheriff Colburn, a toxic waste cover-up, illegal testing on animals. He swallowed. "And my uncle." Evelyn's eyes sharpened. "Where did you get these?" "My uncle hid them. Titan killed his partner. They're trying to push me off the ranch." Evelyn read Nathaniel's letter slowly, her face tightening with each line. When she finished, she exhaled. "Decker, this doesn't just confirm criminal activity. This is a federal-level case." Axel lay at Decker's feet, watching Evelyn with quiet intelligence, assessing whether she was friend or threat. Evelyn tapped the flash drive. "If this contains what I think it does, this whole town has been living under Titan's thumb without knowing it." Decker crossed his arms. "Some knew." Evelyn didn't deny it. "Colburn, some county officials, maybe a few ranch owners with debts." She slid the documents back into the case. I'll need to review everything tonight. Don't tell anyone you came to me. Decker frowned. Why, Titan has surveillance every year. They buy information before they buy land. Axel growled low. Warning. Evelyn's expression softened toward the dog. And keep him close. Titan's legal filings list him as a dangerous military animal. Colburn is preparing paperwork. Decker stiffened, every muscle tensing. Paperwork for what? Evelyn met his eyes. To have Axel euthanized. Decker's blood turned to ice. The room tilted, sound muffled like underwater. Axel lifted his head, sensing the shift, sensing the danger, sensing that something terrible had been said. Evelyn continued, voice steady but grim. Titan wants the ranch. Colburn wants Titan's money. They're using your PTSD record. Axel's breed, last night's disturbance, the bridge incident this morning, to paint you as unfit. Decker stared at the wall, jaw clenching, hands forming fists so tight his nails cut into palms. Every instinct inside him screamed. He could tolerate threats against himself, could handle being called unstable, dangerous, broken, but not his dog, never his dog. Axel licked Decker's hand, a quiet reassurance. I'm here. We're okay. Evelyn closed the case. Listen carefully. You need allies, people who know you're not the caricature Titan is pushing. Who would stand with me? Decker asked. Voice hollow. Evelyn hesitated. Not many right now, but that will change. Decker stepped outside with Axel. The winter sun hurt his eyes, everything too bright, too sharp. As he crossed the street, he felt the town watching again, whispering. A mother tugged her daughter away as Axel walked past, pulled her close like the dog carried disease. See, someone muttered from a porch. That dog's dangerous. A man shook his head. I heard Grant snapped at Colburn. Could be unstable. PTSD or something. Decker kept walking, but Axel's ears flattened. The dog felt the shift as much as he did. Felt the fear, the suspicion, the rejection. Halfway down Main Street, a voice called out, Hey, Grant. Decker turned. Hank Rawlings stepped out of the hardware store, wearing a faded Marine Corps beanie, walking with a limp earned from combat decades earlier. But his eyes were sharp and steady, the eyes of a warrior who'd never stopped fighting. You're stirring things up, Rawlings said. Town doesn't know what to make of it. Decker shrugged. They think I'm trouble. They're scared, Rawlings replied. Titan has been the boogeyman around here for a long time. Men like Colburn love fear. Makes people quiet. Makes them obedient. Decker didn't respond. Didn't have words. Rawlings looked at Axel, then back at Decker, something shifting in his expression. You're not alone, you know. Some of us fought wars too. Some of us know what it's like to come home and still feel hunted. The words struck deeper than Decker expected, hit something raw and exposed. Rawlings stepped closer. If you stand up, we stand up with you. Decker's throat tightened. Axel leaned into Rawlings's leg, sensing the good in the man immediately, sensing safety, sensing kinship. Rawlings smiled. See, your K9 knows. For the first time in days, Decker felt something shift. Something small, but solid. Hope. He walked back to the truck with Axel trotting beside him. The town still stared, still whispered, still feared him. But one man had stepped forward. One spark was all a fire needed. Decker rested a hand on Axel's head. They want to break us, he murmured. Let's give them something to fear instead. Axel barked once, sharp and certain. Together they drove back toward Honor Ridge, the sky dimming behind them. The town had turned quiet, too quiet. But quiet never lasted long before a storm. Decker sat in the cabin that night, Axel curled beside the fireplace. The dog's breathing was steady now, ribs still sore but healing. The bruising turning from purple to yellow, a good sign. Outside wind moved through the pines. Snow fell in soft whispers, the kind of night that should have felt peaceful. But peace was a luxury Decker couldn't afford. He stared at the letter from his uncle, read it again for the 5th time. The words burned into his memory now. Protect Axel. He's more important than he knows. What did that mean? Decker pulled the flash drive from the case, turned it over in his hands. Titan Energy Incident Room 4B, he'd avoided looking at it. Afraid of what he'd find. Afraid of making this real. But if Evelyn was going to build a case, she'd need to know everything. Decker opened his laptop, inserted the drive, waited while it loaded. A folder appeared, labeled Project Guardian. Inside were dozens of files, videos, documents, medical reports, test results, Everything organized with military precision. Decker clicked the first video. The screen showed a sterile lab. White walls, metal tables, cages lining one wall, dogs inside. German shepherds, Malinois, retrievers, all young, all scared. A voice off camera spoke, clinical, cold, detached. Subject 19, K9 designation Axel. Day 7 of TN9 trial. Neural enhancement at 320% baseline. Aggression control stable. Olfactory sensitivity increased 450% above standard. The camera zoomed on a younger Axel, barely 3 years old, thin, scared, eyes wide with fear. A fresh chemical burn on his right cheek, raw, bleeding. Decker's hands shook, rage building like pressure in a sealed container. The voice continued, Subject 19 shows promise for military application. Recommend advancement to Phase 2. Human trials contingent on full K9 success. The video cut to black. Decker sat frozen. Axel wasn't just a K9 partner. He was a weapon, an experiment, a prototype for something darker. Something that turned living beings into tools, into objects. Decker looked at the dog sleeping by the fire. The scars, the trauma, the pain he'd endured, and somehow through it all he'd remained loyal. Loving. Good. Axel had saved his life a dozen times, in Syria, in training, on this ranch. And Titan Energy had tried to break him first, had tortured him, had turned him into something he was never meant to be. Decker closed the laptop, walked to the fireplace, knelt beside Axel. The dog opened one eye, tail thumping softly against the floor. You're not a weapon, Decker whispered. You're my brother. Axel licked his hand, like he understood, like he'd been waiting to hear those words. Decker sat in the quiet, firelight flickering across the walls, shadows dancing. For the first time in 2 years, he prayed. Not the desperate prayers of a man drowning, not the angry prayers of someone who'd lost faith, but the quiet prayer of a man finding purpose. God, he whispered, I don't know why you brought me here. I've failed so many people. But if these 200 lives need me, if Axel needs me, show me what to do. He paused, listening to the wind outside, listening to the silence. Some places don't save us by accident. They're prepared long before we arrive. The words felt true, felt right. Axel suddenly stood, ears forward, body tense. He walked to the door, looked back at Decker, waiting. Decker rose, opened the door. Axel stepped into the snow, not toward the barn, not toward the shed, toward the forest, where the ghost had vanished twice before. You want me to follow? Decker asked. Axel barked once. The K9 command. Follow me, trust me. Decker grabbed his coat, his flashlight, followed his dog into the dark. The forest was silent. Snow muffled every sound, turned the world into something unreal, dreamlike. Axel moved with purpose, nose to the ground, tracking something only he could smell, something his enhanced senses could detect. They walked for 10 minutes, deeper into the woods than Decker had gone before, deeper than seemed safe. Then Axel stopped. Ahead through the trees, a faint light flickered, a campfire, and beside it a small figure sat wrapped in blankets. Blonde hair, pale skin, maybe 15 years old, but looking younger, malnourished, scared. The ghost. She looked up as Decker approached. Fear flashed in her eyes. Animal fear, survival instinct, screaming run. But Axel walked forward slowly, tail wagging gently. Non-threatening. Safe. The girl reached out, touched the dog's head, her hand trembling, and for the first time she spoke. You're Nathaniel's nephew, she whispered. He said you'd come. He said you'd protect them. Decker knelt, keeping distance, keeping his voice soft, non-threatening. What's your name? The girl hesitated, then answered, voice barely audible. Annabelle, but everyone called me Annie. Annie, Decker repeated. How long have you been out here? Her eyes filled with tears. Almost 4 years, since they killed my father. Decker's heart stopped. Who killed your father? Annie looked up, voice breaking. Titan Energy. They killed Garrett Whitmore because he found their secret. Annie sat by the dying campfire, her hands wrapped around a tin cup. Steam rose in the cold air. She looked at Decker with eyes far older than 15. Eyes that had seen things no child should see. My father was Garrett Whitmore. He worked as an environmental engineer for the county. Not for Titan, but he had to inspect their sites. Check for violations. Make sure they followed regulations. She paused, swallowed hard. In early 2021, he found something at North Ridge, barrels buried in the ground, leaking into the water table. He took samples, photographed everything, told my mom we were going to be safe soon, that he'd expose what they were doing. Tears ran down her cheeks, cutting through dirt and grime. 3 weeks later, Titan came for us. Decker felt ice settle in his stomach. They took us to their lab, said we knew too much, said we had to disappear, that we were a threat to national security. Her voice broke. They injected my parents with something, TN9, high doses, to test lethality, to see how fast it would kill. My father died in 11 days. My mother lasted 13. Axel moved closer to Annie, pressed his body against her side. She wrapped her arms around the dog and sobbed, deep, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. Decker couldn't speak, couldn't move, his mind reeling. I was supposed to die too, Annie whispered, but they gave me a smaller dose to see how children reacted, to gather data. I got sick, so sick I wanted to die, but I lived. She looked up at Decker. Your uncle found me, hiding in the woods near the lab, half dead, delirious. He brought me here, taught me how to care for the animals, how to stay hidden, how to survive. Decker's hands clenched into fists, rage building, white-hot fury that threatened to consume him. Nathaniel told me someone would come, someone who'd finish what he started. He said to watch for a man with a canine partner, a man who'd lost people but kept fighting. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a small USB drive, sealed in plastic, protected. He told me to give this to you, only you. When I was sure you were the one, Decker took the drive. What's on it? Annie's voice hardened, 15 years old but sounding ancient. Proof, video from the lab. My father hid cameras before they killed him. Everything Titan did. Everyone who helped them. She met Decker's eyes, including the man who gave the order. The fire crackled, snow fell around them. The forest held its breath. Decker knelt in front of Annie. You're safe now, I promise you. No one will hurt you again. Annie shook her head. They'll keep trying, they always do. Not this time, Decker said, because now we have what they're afraid of. The truth. Axel barked once. Agreement, certainty. Annie looked at the dome, then at Decker, something shifting in her expression. Hope, maybe, or the possibility of hope. Your uncle said you were special, that you'd know what to do. Decker stood, helped Annie to her feet. She weighed almost nothing, bones and determination. Come with us. Back to the ranch. Dr. Briggs will make sure you're warm and fed. Annie hesitated. 4 years of hiding didn't disappear in one conversation. 4 years of survival instincts screaming, don't trust anyone. But Axel nudged her hand, gentle, insistent, safe. She nodded. They walked back through the forest together. Man-Dog and the ghost who'd finally stepped into the light, finally allowed herself to be found. When they reached the cabin, Dr. Briggs was waiting on the porch. His face broke into relief when he saw Annie, tears in his eyes. Child, he whispered, we've been looking for you. Annie ran to him, let herself be held for the first time in years. Let herself be a child again. Just for a moment. Decker stood in the snow, watching. The USB drive heavy in his pocket. Tomorrow everything would change. Tonight they'd brought one ghost home. The next morning arrived with frost on the windows. Decker sat at the kitchen table with Evelyn Drummond. She'd driven up at dawn after he called. No questions asked, just came. Now she stared at the contents of USB number 2. Her face had gone pale, hands trembling slightly. The video showed a concrete room, medical equipment, 3 people strapped to gurneys, struggling, screaming, begging, a man, a woman, a young girl, Garrett Whitmore, his wife Rebecca, their daughter Annabelle. A voice off camera gave orders, clear, unmistakable, American accent, military bearing. Subject Alpha. Garrett Whitmore, male, age 42, administer 50 milliliters TN9, direct injection, record time of death for the file. The camera panned to show the speaker. Garrett Stryker, head of Titan Energy Security, former Marine Force Recon, the same man who'd ambushed Decker on the bridge yesterday, the same man who'd served at Quantico alongside him 15 years ago, who'd taught him hand-to-hand combat, who'd been his friend once. Evelyn stopped the video. She looked sick. This is it, she said quietly. This is everything we need. Decker's jaw was tight. How fast can you move? I already filed for an emergency hearing. County court, tomorrow morning. Judge Moira Blackwell presiding. She looked at him. But Decker, you need to understand, Blackwell has taken money from Titan. This won't be easy. She'll fight us every step. I don't need easy, Decker said. I need public. Evelyn nodded. Then we make it public. We invite every reporter within 200 miles. We live stream it. We make sure Titan can't bury this. She paused. And we bring Axel. Decker frowned. Why Panemun? Because according to these files, he's not just your K9 partner. He's evidence, Project Guardian, Subject 19. If we can prove Titan experimented on military working dogs, we can trigger federal oversight, criminal investigation, everything. Decker looked at Axel. The dog sat by the fireplace, watching them with intelligent eyes, understanding more than most people gave him credit for. He's not evidence, Decker said. He's family. I know, Evelyn replied softly, but right now, he's the key to bringing them down. That night, Decker couldn't sleep. He sat on the porch with Axel beside him. Stars stretched overhead, clear and cold, beautiful and indifferent. Hank Rawlings pulled up in his truck, got out slowly, walked to the porch like a man with purpose. Heard about tomorrow, Rawlings said. Decker nodded. Brought some friends, just in case. Headlights appeared down the driveway. One truck, then another, then 3 more. 9 vehicles total, each carrying a veteran. Men who'd served in Vietnam, Desert Storm, Iraq, Afghanistan. Different wars, same brotherhood. Men who'd come home to find their country had changed, but their values hadn't. They parked in a semicircle, got out, walked toward the porch, boots crunching in snow. Breath fogging, eyes hard. Rawlings made introductions. This is Dale Mercer, Army, Bronze Star, Iraq. This is Tom Beckett, Navy, 2 tours in the Gulf. This is Franklin Moore, Marines, Kisan. This is... Decker shook each hand, looked each man in the eye, saw himself reflected back. Broken but undefeated. They didn't say much, didn't need to. When you'd walk through, the fire words became unnecessary. We'll be at that courthouse tomorrow, Rawlings said. Front row. Let them try something with all of us watching. Decker's throat tightened. You don't have to do this. Yeah, Rawlings replied. We do. Your uncle tried to stand alone. Look what happened. No more standing alone. Not for any of us. We're brothers. That doesn't end when the war does. The men nodded, a quiet agreement, a pact. They stayed for an hour, drinking coffee, telling stories, finding the kind of peace that only came from being understood, from being seen. When they left, Decker sat back down with Axel. Tomorrow's going to be hard, he whispered. Axel rested his head on Decker's knee. But we're not alone anymore. The dog's tail thumped twice. In the distance, the ranch slept. 200 animals safe under the watch of Dr. Briggs and young Annie. A sanctuary that had nearly died, but was being reborn. The courtroom of Glacier County filled before dawn. Every seat taken. Reporters lined the walls. Cameras set up in the back. The room hummed with anticipation, with tension. Evelyn had made good on her promise. This would be public. Decker sat at the plaintiff's table. Axel lay at his feet. The K9 partner, calm despite the crowd, despite the noise, trusting Decker completely. Across the aisle, Titan Energy's legal team sat in expensive suits. 3 attorneys, led by Victor Strand, a man known for winning cases that couldn't be won, a man who made problems disappear. And behind them in the gallery sat Garrett Stryker, head of security, the man who'd given the order to kill the Whitmores. His eyes met Decker's, cold, calculating, unafraid. The bailiff called the court to order. Judge Moira Blackwell entered, 61 years old, gray hair pulled tight, face carved from stone. She surveyed the packed courtroom with displeasure. This is a preliminary hearing, she said. Not a circus. Anyone disrupts these proceedings, they're removed. No exceptions. She sat, looked at Evelyn with thinly veiled contempt. Ms. Drummond, you requested this emergency session. Make it quick. Evelyn stood, poised, professional, deadly. Your Honor, we're here because Titan Energy Corporation has engaged in criminal activity that threatens this entire community. Illegal dumping of toxic waste, unlawful experimentation on animals and humans, and murder. Strand rose. Your Honor, these are wild accusations without foundation. Mrs. Drummond is trying to... I have evidence, Evelyn interrupted. She approached the bench, handed copies of the financial ledgers to the judge, to Strand, to the court reporter, each page damning, each signature a confession. These documents show payments from Titan Energy to Sheriff Wade Colburn, to county officials, to you, Your Honor, campaign contributions that crossed the line into bribery. The courtroom erupted. Gasps, shouts, cameras flashing. Blackwell's face went white, then red, then purple. "You're accusing this court of corruption." "I'm presenting evidence of corruption," Evelyn replied calmly. "The court can decide what it means." Strand stood. "Your Honor, these documents could easily be fabricated without proper authentication." "They're authenticated," Evelyn said. "Forensic analysis confirms they're genuine, signed by Titan executives, including Mr. Stryker." She pointed to the gallery. Stryker's jaw tightened, but he didn't move, didn't react. Evelyn continued, "But that's not all. We have video evidence of Titan Energy conducting illegal medical experiments on civilians, resulting in 2 deaths, Garrett and Rebecca Whitmore, in 2021. She inserted USB number 2 into the courtroom's display system. The screen flickered to life. Garrett Whitmore's face appeared, strapped to a gurney, terrified, helpless. Then Stryker's voice, cold, clinical, inhuman. Subject Alpha, Garrett Whitmore, male, age 42. Administer 50 milliliters TN9. The courtroom went silent, absolutely silent. Everyone watching as the injection was administered, as Garrett Whitmore began to seize, as medical staff recorded his vitals with detached professionalism, as he died. When the video ended, several people in the gallery were crying. A reporter in the back vomited into a trash can. Judge Blackwell looked shaken, genuinely shaken, but she recovered quickly. Years of practice, years of compartmentalizing. "So, Drummond, where did you obtain this video?" "From a witness who survived Titan's experiments, who will testify if needed." Strand jumped on it, sensing weakness. "Your Honor, anonymous sources are not admissible. This video has no chain of custody, no verification. It could be doctored, computer-generated, deep fake. We have no way to authenticate." The courtroom doors opened. Annie Whitmore walked in, 15 years old, blonde hair clean for the first time in years. "Wearing clothes, doctor." Briggs had found, looking fragile but determined. She walked down the aisle, every eye on her, every camera following. Evelyn met her halfway. "Your Honor, I'd like to call my witness, Annabelle Whitmore, daughter of Garrett and Rebecca Whitmore, survivor of Titan Energy's experiments." The courtroom exploded again. Chaos, shouting, cameras flashing. Blackwell banged her gavel. "Order, order," but the damage was done. The truth was out. Strand looked panicked. Stryker was already moving toward the exit, trying to escape. But Hank Rawlings and 3 other veterans stood, blocking the door, arms crossed, eyes hard. "Sit down, son," Rawlings said quietly. Stryker sat, trapped. Annie took the stand. The bailiff swore her in. Her hand shook on the Bible. Evelyn approached gently, like approaching a frightened animal. "Annie, can you tell the court what happened to your family in 2021? Annie's voice was small but steady. "Titan Energy kidnapped us. They took us to a lab at North Ridge. They injected my parents with a chemical, TN9, to test it, to see what it would do." Her voice broke. "My father died in 11 days. My mother in 13. I watched them die. I couldn't help them." The courtroom was silent, absolutely silent. "And you?" Evelyn asked softly. "They gave me a smaller dose, to see how children reacted. To gather data. I got sick, but I lived." She looked directly at Stryker. No fear now, only rage. "That man gave the order. I heard his voice. I saw his face. He killed my parents." Stryker stood. "She's lying. She's a child who doesn't understand." "I have the video," Annie said, her voice stronger now. "My father hid cameras. He knew what they were going to do. He recorded everything." She pulled a second USB from her pocket. "This one shows the burial, where they put my parents' bodies, GPS coordinates, everything." Evelyn took the drive, handed it to the judge. Blackwell stared at it like it might explode, like it might destroy her career, which it would. Strand tried one more time, desperate now. "Your Honor, even if this video is authentic, it doesn't prove anything about the larger operation. One incident." "It's not one incident," Evelyn said. She approached the bench with a thick file, documents, medical reports, test results. Project Guardian, Titan Energy's illegal testing program. 25K9 military working dogs stolen from the training facilities. Subjected to chemical enhancement trials. 23 died, 2 survived. She gestured to Axel. Subject 19, K9 designation Axel, stolen in 2019, experimented on for 6 months. chemical burns to facial tissue, enhanced olfactory sensitivity, increased neural capacity, torture disguised as science. Decker felt his chest tighten. Hearing it said aloud made it real, made it undeniable. Evelyn continued. Nathaniel Grant rescued him, along with nearly 200 other animals Titan had used for testing. He hid them at Honor Ridge Ranch, creating a sanctuary for the evidence Titan wanted destroyed. She looked at the judge. Decker Grant's uncle was murdered for protecting those animals, for protecting the truth. And now Titan wants to kill Axel, to eliminate the last surviving evidence of their crimes. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Judge Blackwell looked at the documents, at the videos, at Annie, at Axel. Ms. Drummond, she said slowly, what are you asking this court to do? Evelyn straightened. Immediate seizure of all Titan Energy assets in Montana. Federal investigation into criminal negligence murder and corporate malfeasance. Arrest warrants for Garrett Stryker and all executives involved in Project Guardian. She paused. In recognition of Honor Ridge Ranch as a protected sanctuary. Legally untouchable. Permanently. Strand stood. Your Honor, you can't possibly. Sit down, Mr. Strand, Blackwell said. Her voice had changed, softer, almost defeated. I've been on this bench for 19 years. I've made decisions I'm proud of, and decisions I'm not. She looked at Annie. I took money from Titan Energy. I won't deny it. Campaign contributions. I told myself they were legal, that everyone did it, that it didn't compromise my integrity. She removed her glasses, suddenly looking old, tired. I was wrong. The courtroom held its breath, but I won't compound that mistake by letting this continue. She looked at Strand. Titan Energy's operations in Glacier County are hereby suspended pending federal investigation. All assets frozen, property seized, effective immediately. She banged her gavel. Then she looked at the bailiff. Arrest Garrett Stryker, charges of first-degree murder, 2 counts, and conspiracy to commit murder. Stryker stood. You can't do this. I have immunity. Corporate, you have nothing, Blackwell said coldly. And if I were you, I'd start cooperating. Because the FBI is going to want to know who else was involved, and I suspect you'll talk to save yourself. As if on cue, the courtroom doors opened. A man in a dark suit entered, FBI identification on his belt, 2 more agents behind him. Agent Darren McAllister, Federal Bureau of Investigation. I have warrants for Garrett Stryker, Sheriff Wade Colburn, and anyone else connected to Project Guardian. Behind him, more agents entered, filling the courtroom, surrounding the Titan legal team. Colburn, sitting in the back, tried to run. He didn't make it 5 steps before Rawlings and 2 other veterans blocked his path. Going somewhere, Rawlings asked. Voice flat, eyes hard. The FBI took Colburn into custody, then Stryker. Then 3 Titan executives who'd been sitting in the gallery. As they led Stryker past Decker, he stopped, looked at his former friend. You don't understand, Stryker said, voice breaking. We were trying to help, to make soldiers stronger, to save lives, to end wars. Decker met his eyes. You killed families, tortured animals, destroyed lives. He paused. You didn't save anyone. You became the enemy. Stryker had no answer. His face crumpled, years of justification collapsing. The FBI led him away in handcuffs. As he passed Annie, he stopped, looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. I'm sorry, he whispered, for what it's worth. I'm sorry. Annie stared at him, silent. Then she turned away. Some apologies came too late. The courtroom erupted in conversation, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. The biggest story to hit Montana in decades. Through it all, Decker sat quietly, Axel's head resting on his lap. Annie standing with Evelyn, safe, protected, finally able to grieve properly. Judge Blackwell banged her gavel one last time. This court stands adjourned. She looked at Decker, something like respect in her eyes. Mr. Grant, your ranch is yours. No one will take it from you. You have my word, and I'll be watching to make sure that promise is kept. Decker nodded, unable to speak, emotion choking him. It was over. The war was won. 2 months later, spring came to Montana. Snow melted into rushing streams. Grass pushed through thawing ground. Wildflowers bloomed in impossible colors. The ranch that had been dead through winter came alive with promise. Honor Ridge was gone. In its place stood Valor Ridge Sanctuary. The new sign was carved from Montana pine, mounted at the entrance to the property. Beautiful, permanent. Beneath it, a smaller plaque read, "In memory of Nathaniel Grant, Garrett Whitmore, Rebecca Whitmore, and all who gave their lives protecting the innocent." Decker stood looking at it, Axel beside him. The dog's limp had faded completely. His ribs had healed. He was stronger now than he'd been in months. Thriving, behind them, the sanctuary thrived. 200 animals from Nathaniel's original rescue, plus 94 more recovered from other Titan facilities across Montana. All of them safe now, protected by law, cared for by a growing staff of volunteers. Dr. Briggs had moved into the guest cabin permanently, working full-time as the sanctuary's veterinarian, teaching, healing, finding purpose in his final years. Annie lived there too, legally adopted by Hank Rawlings. The old Marine had lost his son to suicide years ago after the war. He'd found a daughter in the girl who'd survived the impossible. She was learning veterinary medicine from Briggs, going to school online, making friends for the first time in years, slowly healing from 4 years of trauma, slowly learning to be a teenager again. And every evening she sat with the animals, talking to them softly, reminding them they were safe, that they were loved. Evelyn Drummond had opened a second office in Glacier Falls, dedicated to environmental justice, taking on cases no one else would touch, fighting corporations that thought they were above the law. She'd become a hero to some, a threat to others, but she didn't seem to care which. The FBI investigation had grown. Expanding beyond Montana, Titan Energy's entire network was under scrutiny. 8 executives had pleaded guilty, 12 more awaited trial. The corporation itself had filed for bankruptcy, dissolved. Garrett Stryker was in federal prison. Life sentence, no parole. He'd turned state's evidence, given up names, locations, everything he knew, hoping for some mercy that would never come. Sheriff Colburn had done the same. 20 years. He'd be 70 when he got out, if he lived that long. Judge Blackwell had resigned quietly, moved out of state, trying to rebuild a reputation destroyed by greed. A new judge had been appointed, someone with no ties to Titan, someone who couldn't be bought, someone who actually believed in justice. And Decker, he'd found something he thought he'd lost in Syria, purpose. Every week, veterans came to Valor Ridge, men and women struggling with PTSD, addiction, homelessness, looking for peace in a world that no longer made sense. They worked with the animals, cleaned stalls, repaired fences, fed the horses, walked the mounds, simple work, honest work. And slowly they started to heal. Because animals didn't judge, didn't demand explanations, didn't need to understand what had happened overseas. They just needed care. And in caring for them, the veterans found something to care about again, found a reason to get up in the morning. Decker watched it happen, week after week, month after month. Men who couldn't sleep at night found rest in the barn. The presence of animals somehow quieting the noise in their heads. Women who couldn't trust anyone learned to trust a horse, learned that not everything would hurt them. Kids who'd lost parents in the war found comfort in a dog's unconditional love, found that loyalty still existed. The ranch that had been built to hide became a place that healed. One afternoon in late April, Decker sat on the porch with Axel. The sun was setting, painting the mountains gold and orange and purple, beautiful beyond words. A truck pulled up the driveway. A young man got out, maybe 25, military haircut growing out, haunted eyes, shoulders hunched like he was carrying invisible weight. He walked slowly toward the porch, uncertain, afraid. "Is this Valor Ridge?" he asked. "It is," Decker replied. I was told this is a place for veterans, people who—" He trailed off, unable to finish, unable to name what he was feeling. Decker stood, extended his hand. "I'm Decker Grant, former Navy SEAL. This is Axel, my K-9 partner." The young man shook his hand. "Marcus, Army. Just got back from deployment, Afghanistan. I didn't know where else to go." "You're in the right place, Marcus. You're home." The young man's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't think I'd ever have a home again." "You do now," Decker said. "Come on, I'll show you around." As they walked toward the barn, Axel fell into step beside Marcus. The young veteran reached down, touched the dog's head, hesitant, gentle. Axel leaned into him, offering comfort, offering presence, and Marcus smiled for the first time in months. Over the following weeks, Marcus found his rhythm, working with the horses each morning, helping Dr. Briggs with veterinary rounds, sitting with Annie out as she studied, finding purpose in routine, in being needed. He stopped having nightmares after the first month, started sleeping through the night after the second. By the third month, he was teaching other veterans how to work with the animals, passing on what he'd learned, becoming part of the solution. Evelyn Drummond stopped by every Friday, bringing updates on the Titan case. 3 more states had launched investigations. Federal legislation was being drafted to prevent similar abuses. The victims of Project Guardian were finally getting justice and compensation. Annie received a settlement, enough to pay for college, medical school if she wanted, a future stolen but returned. She put most of it into a trust for Valor Ridge. The animals saved me, she told Decker. Now I want to save them. Dr. Briggs trained her every day, teaching her sutures, diagnostics, how to read an animal's body language, how to heal. She had a gift for it, the same gift her father had for seeing what others missed. Hank Rawlings became the unofficial foreman of the sanctuary, organizing work crews, coordinating volunteers, making sure everyone who came to Valor Ridge felt welcome, felt valued. He'd found purpose again. After years of feeling useless, he was needed, and that made all the difference. That evening, Decker stood at the memorial he'd built near the main gate. 4 names carved into stone: Nathaniel Grant, Garrett Whitmore, Rebecca Whitmore, and below them the names of 3 men from Syria: Blake Sutherland, Travis Holbrook, Dylan Merritt. Men Decker had lost because he'd hesitated, because he'd waited 6 minutes, because he'd followed orders instead of instinct. But beside their names, he'd added something else, a verse. Proverbs 12:10. The righteous care for the needs of their animals. Decker knelt, placed his hand on the stone, cold, solid, permanent. I used to think I was late, he whispered, that I'd failed because I didn't get there in time. Axel sat beside him, patient, understanding. But maybe I was exactly where I needed to be. Maybe being late just meant arriving at the right moment, to save what could still be saved. He looked at the sanctuary stretching before him. 294 animals, alive, safe, thriving, 18 veterans living on the property, working, healing, finding purpose again. One 15-year-old girl who'd survived hell, now learning to be a kid again, and one K-9 partner who'd gone from being a weapon to being a friend of a healer, a miracle. Decker stood. Miracles don't always fall from the sky, he said, repeating words he'd heard in a chapel long ago. Sometimes they're buried in the darkest parts of the earth, waiting for someone brave enough to dig them up. He looked at Axel. Thank you for digging with me, partner. Axel barked once. Agreement, affirmation, love. Then the dog turned, trotted back toward the barn where Annie was feeding the evening meal, where Marcus was learning to brush a horse, where Dr. Briggs was teaching, where life was happening. Decker followed. The sun set behind the mountains, casting long shadows across Valor Ridge, turning everything gold. A place that had been mocked as dead, but was more alive than anywhere Decker had ever been. He paused at the barn door, looked back one more time at the memorial, at the names of men he couldn't save, and the animals he could. I'm not late anymore, he whispered. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. From inside the barn, laughter echoed, Annie's voice bright with joy. Dr. Briggs telling a story, Marcus asking questions about the horses, the sound of healing, of hope, the sound of life returning to a place that had known too much death. Decker stepped inside. Axel was already there, lying beside Annie as she brushed a rescued mare. The dog looked up at Decker, eyes calm, content, happy. Home. They were home. And for the first time in 2 years, Decker believed tomorrow would be better than yesterday. Because some battles end not with violence, but with hope. And hope he'd learned was stronger than any weapon Titan could build. Stronger than fear, stronger than greed, stronger than death itself. The Lord bless all who hear this with hope. May you find your purpose in protecting those who cannot protect themselves. May you arrive exactly when you're meant to, not a moment too late, but right on time. Proverbs 12:10 teaches us the righteous care for the needs of their animals, but the cruel show no compassion. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs hope. Comment where you're watching from. Subscribe for more stories of faith, loyalty, and silent miracles. Because the world needs more Valor Ridges, more places where the broken can heal, more people willing to fight for those who can't fight for themselves, and more canine partners who remind us that loyalty isn't given, it's earned, one moment at a time, one life at a time, one miracle at a time. Amen.